Good morning and welcome. It's good to be here with all of you today. Today we look at the thief on the cross and why it's good to be like him. And I'm not going to be talking about why it's good to rob banks or steal cars. But I am going to talk about why it's good to follow the model of the thief on the cross. On the cross, Jesus says to the thief, "Today you will be with me in paradise," which means to a philosopher like me that they are planning to next go to the nearest university library. For what could be more of a paradise than going to a university library? But I don't think that's what Jesus was talking about, even though I really wish that he was. But at least I did get to go to the Fresno Pacific University Library to prepare this sermon. I picked out 8 commentaries on Luke, which is, we read the passage today on the thief on the cross from Luke. And I picked out 2 political philosophy books on past and current threats to democracy and justice. 8 books about an innocent man who was tortured and killed at the hands of an empire, and 2 books about those who want to emulate empires. I took my stack of commentaries and philosophy books to check them out at the front desk at the Fresno Pacific Library. And I was greeted by a library worker there who I've come to know. I wish I knew his name, but I don't. He's always interested in what I check out, and he always asks me about it and comments about it. And he noticed the commentaries on Luke, and he said, "Are you preparing a sermon?" And I said, "Well, yes, I am preparing a sermon." And I said, "I want to make sure I know what I'm talking about." That's the commentaries. He replied, "Ah." Oh, and I told him I was going to give the sermon on the thief on the cross. And instantly he said, "Ah." The story of how one guy gets it and the other guy doesn't. Precisely. The librarian summed the story well. And so thank you to our librarians. This sermon is about the guy who gets it. Yes, the guy who got it was a thief, or was he? We're not sure, actually, whether he was a thief. The translation that we read today says criminal. Doesn't necessarily mean thief. But we know him as the thief, so that's how I'm going to talk about him. I'll refer to him as the thief because that's what he's known as being, the thief on the cross. He could have been a thief, it's true. That's still possible. He could have been a car thief, or rather a horse thief, which would be a car thief of that time. Horse thieves were sometimes nailed to the cross for people to walk by and look at and stare at, so that they would be reminded not to go ahead and steal horses themselves. But the thief might also have been an enemy of the state. A rebel, a traitor, someone who actively sought to undermine the empire. And if the thief were a rebel, then placing Jesus between the thieves on the cross would have sent the message that Jesus too was being executed for being a threat to the empire. This seems to me likely, since Luke mentions that the title, the King of the Jews, was placed on the cross above Jesus' head, sending the message to those who were watching and those who were passing by that this will happen to you too if you go against the Roman and Jewish authorities by claiming to be a king. After all, Jesus constantly preached about the kingdom of God, a kingdom that's not Rome, a kingdom that's not like Rome based on hierarchy, order, and power. A kingdom where rulers shall be like servants, and the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Very un-Roman. The Roman and Jewish authorities may have worried that Jesus' kingdom threatened their kingdom, a kingdom where the first always remained first, and the last always remained last. Crucifixion is one of the very worst ways to die. I cannot even think of something worse than crucifixion. It's designed to be a prolonged torture and humiliation involving horrific pain for 6 hours to 4 days, depending on how long it took for the person on the cross to die. Hanging someone on the cross was also considered to be one of the ultimate ways of shaming a person. And this is a world where honor and shame are very important, and where being shamed is one of the worst things that can happen to you. Crucifixion is Rome's way of saying, if you oppose our power, then we will utterly shame you and reject you. And your dishonor will continue even after your death, as your corpse will hang on the cross for people to walk by and see, and for the birds to pick at. While hanging on the cross, with this fate in mind, no doubt, this will happen to his corpse after he dies on the cross, the thief says to Jesus, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." The kingdom of Rome completely rejected him. And so the thief seeks to be part of a new kingdom that is not Rome, to be part of a just and merciful kingdom for the utterly outcast. And Jesus says to him, the thief, "Today you will be with me in paradise." With these words, in these very last moments, Jesus does what he has always done. He reaches out to the marginalized, the outcast, and the vulnerable. In saying, "You will be with me in paradise," Jesus gives the thief entry to a place of honor and friendship. And he gives him forgiveness for whatever he did that was wrong. And I wish that Luke had told us what that was, but we don't know. And so Jesus sends the message that there is hope for horse thieves and traitors too. That's what Jesus did for the thief, and that's very important. But I want to look at what the thief did for Jesus, something that perhaps we don't always think about. To understand that, let's look at another story of execution. This time in a medieval fantasy kingdom on the island of Westeros. It's from a little-known TV show called The Game of Thrones. It's definitely rated R, so I am not here recommending that we in church watch that show. Don't get the wrong idea. But I will recommend watching just the non-rated R execution scene, because it's really good, and you can find it on YouTube. It's easy to watch for free. Just that scene, just that non-rated R scene. In this show, Ned Stark is an honest man, one of the few honest men in this TV show. He's known for his integrity. He's the second to the king, called the Hand of the King in the TV show. Before the king dies, the king gives Ned an official sealed letter. And in the letter, it says that Ned should be the Lord Protector of the realm until the king's son comes of age. The king's son, by the way, is psychopathic and is clearly evil. Ned shows the queen to the letter. Ned shows the letter to the queen. The queen immediately rips up the letter and accuses Ned of being a traitor against the new king, her psychopathic son. The new king then makes Ned give a false confession of guilt. He has to do that to save his daughter's life, so he does it. He gives a false confession of guilt. And then the king has his head chopped off. It's all very sad and unjust, because Ned has done nothing wrong. He's one of the few good guys in the show. And Ned doesn't even want any power. He is not a seeker of power. Watching this powerful scene made me feel very uncomfortable inside. But I think that's a discomfort that's a very good kind of discomfort, because it's a discomfort that comes when the evil king wins and when the good guy is wrongfully killed. I had this horrible and profound, yet I think very important feeling in that scene that we get when injustice wins. This feeling, I think, reveals our deep sense of justice and our deep value in justice and our deep aversion to injustice. But what is really sad about this scene, for me, is that there is no one there who can say out loud that this is wrong. The crowd believes the lie that Ned is a traitor. Someone in the crowd even threw something at Ned that hit him in his head, and Stan said he was going to bring tomatoes before the service to throw at me. But fortunately, I don't think he's going to, so thank you. But anyway, that's what happened to Ned. So what is really sad, I was saying there's no one there who can say out loud that this is wrong. The crowd believes the lie that Ned is a traitor. I mentioned that. And in any case, anyone who actually spoke out and said that this is wrong would also have been executed by the king. It was a dangerous situation. But Ned was executed alone. There was no one else there. Because the only person who really could have spoken out was someone who's going to be killed anyway. But there was no other such person there. So Ned was alone. No one could speak out on his behalf. If someone else were there to say, hey, this is wrong, then this scene wouldn't have left me with this completely horrible feeling. Because I would feel like injustice hasn't completely won. Because now it's out in the open. Someone has spoken it. That justice and power are not the same thing. That justice is justice, no matter how much the powers that be say injustice is justice, because they say it is. Unlike Ned Stark, Jesus is not alone during his execution. The thief says to the other thief who is being crucified with him, "We are rightly condemned, for we are receiving the appropriate sentence for what we did. But this man has done nothing wrong." I think what he is saying here is that Jesus hasn't done anything that would normally deserve the kind of punishment that is crucifixion. They did something that warranted crucifixion. Jesus didn't do something that normally warranted crucifixion. Jesus wasn't a violent insurrectionist. He wasn't a traitor. He may have rode donkeys, but he certainly was no horse thief. The thief here defends Jesus' innocence and names the injustice. This may seem little, but I actually think it's huge. It's certainly huge for me. Because if I were ever unjustly punished, I would hope for another person who could recognize my innocence and who could speak out on behalf of me and say that this is wrong. For then I would not die feeling completely abandoned and rejected. And I would not die with the feeling that injustice has completely won. We don't usually think of how the thief may have comforted Jesus on the cross. And I think there are many reasons for that. We often focus on how Jesus is part of God's plan. And so we sometimes miss what Jesus may be experiencing as he's dying. Or we often think instead or puzzle over and try to figure out how it was possible for the thief on the cross to be saved, to go to paradise, because he never actually confessed that Jesus is Lord and Savior. And a lot of commentaries do focus on that question. And so, because we focus on that, we may miss out on what Jesus is actually experiencing on the cross. Or we may have come to think or have been taught that Jesus doesn't actually experience emotional pain and anguish. We may not think that Jesus has anything that he needs from us. We may not think that Jesus needs us because Jesus is Jesus. Jesus doesn't need anything. Yet on the cross, Jesus cried out, my God, why have you abandoned me?" This seems to me like a cry from someone who feels completely abandoned and rejected. I think Jesus needed affirmation, and the thief provided it. This is what the thief did for Jesus. And now the question is, what can we do for the thief? He asks Jesus to remember him. We can remember him too. We can remember him as the one who was there for Jesus at the end. And just as the thief named the injustice of Jesus' execution, so too can we name the injustice of the thief's execution. What, you might say? Wasn't the thief guilty? He even confessed he was guilty. He said, I'm guilty, Jesus isn't. True, but I think the thief still suffered an injustice. We do need to be careful before making judgments about practices in other times and places, because in other times and places, the practices make more sense. And it is true that crucifixion may make more sense in that time and place. However, sometimes we are right to condemn the practices of other times and places. And I think we must do so to stand up for the victims of those times and places. If there were someone in France, maybe someone named Jean, who in the 1800s was imprisoned for 19 years of hard labor because he stole a loaf of bread, then we are right to say that it was unjust for him to receive that punishment for stealing a loaf of bread. And here I'm referring to Jean Valjean of Les Miserables. And so I think we're right to conclude that Rome was unjust to crucify the thief. I think we are right to conclude that crucifixion is a brutal and unjust form of punishment for any time and any place. It is horrific, even at that time. And so I name the injustice. On behalf of the thief on the cross, I name the injustice. We can name it too whenever we remember him. Of course, it's better to stop injustice when we can, but often we can't. But we always have the power to name the injustice. We can name the injustice for those innocents today who are wrongly punished by those in power. And we can do this for those who may have done something wrong, but who received a punishment that was much harsher than what they deserved. We can do this for George Floyd, for Breonna Taylor, for the Central Park Five, and for all those who are victims of racial injustice. We can do this for the innocent people of Gaza. We can do this for all those in prison who were unjustly targeted for small crimes. Guilty, yes, but didn't warrant the degree of the punishment that they received. We can do this for all of those in our social media saturated world who are unjustly shamed, rejected, mocked, and lied about. We need to remember what the thief did for Jesus today, especially. We live in a time where ideologies that promote injustice are on the rise, and where political leaders and political candidates threaten to go after political opponents without offering any evidence of criminal wrongdoing. For when candidates like that are in power, we may see some more Ned Starks at the metaphorical chopping block. In an age such as this, may we have the courage to be like the thief on the cross who got it, even though it's much more fun to be in a library.
Well, good morning, all of you Zoomers. Good to see you all. You